Hey guys, it's Jacob Circle here, bringing you guys another tutorial. Today we're going to be talking about how to make grass. Now this is kind of a different format that I'm testing out, so please let me know what you guys think about it. But right now we're just kind of setting up some of our beginning render settings. I'm going to change the actual X and Y tile size to be higher since I am rendering on a GPU. But now we're going to add our landscape in. So I actually have a landscape plugin that comes default with Blender. It's called Ant Landscape, so you want to make sure that you enable that. Basically, I'm just going to play around with the random seed until I get a thing that I like. This is the one I ended up going with. I just scaled it up a bit, and now I'm actually going to set our camera by going lock to camera to view. If you hit N, you should be able to go to that menu over there. And then we're just going to position it wherever we like, and then once we have it positioned, we're actually going to disable that so we don't mess up the position like that. Now we're actually going to make a quick vertex group so that all of our particles in the future are only going to be spawned in this kind of camera area instead of outside of it, just to save on some memory. So to do that, you just want to make a new vertex group. You can name that vertex group whatever you want. I just named it grass shape, or sorry, grass area for mine. And you just want to hit assign whenever you have that, and you should now have a new vertex group that we can use later. Next, I'm going to actually import the images that I had of actual grass textures. You can just download these off of Google, but this is an add-on called Import Images to Planes. Again, just go to the preferences and enable that in Blender. It comes default, so you don't have to download anything. This image was actually a fake PNG, so that was pretty funny. Just deleted that. But as you can see, these are all of the ones that we have. We're now going to edit the dandelion, so you can double tap G to kind of bring in the edges right there, and then we're going to hold Control and R to add some loop cuts, and we're kind of just making a grid like this. And then we can actually go into the edit mode, make sure proportional editing is turned on so we can affect kind of an area instead of just a specific vertex. And we can scale that down and kind of just move it around randomly. We're trying to add some random shapes to this actual dandelion thing, so it's not a flat image because that's boring and we don't want boring. And so we're actually going to do this to all of the other images as well. I'm going to skip through those in a little bit. But right here, you do want to make sure that the origin is on the bottom of the dandelion like that. And so to do that, just go into edit mode, select all the faces, and then move it to where the origin is. The only interesting thing to note about the actual grass blades itself is that I had to loop cut the actual blades individually and such so that they would divide amongst each other. You can't really do it where the actual loop cut is going through a blade. You want to make sure that the loop cuts are going on the side of the blade, so I did the same thing with proportional editing and moved it around. So now we have all of the actual blades and stuff set up. We're actually going to separate them because right now they are their own object, and we need, or sorry, they're one object and we need them to be their own object. And so if you just face select each individual blade, you can actually press the P key to set it to selection so that they are now their own objects. And then you just kind of want to select all of them and set the origin to be the actual center of their individual mass. And then you can just kind of, in edit mode, move that up again to set the origin to the bottom. Now here we're actually going to make a clump of grass, and so I'm just going to drag out one of the blades. And then we're going to add a couple of array modifiers, both in the X and the Z direction. I have no idea why it's the Z and not the Y. It's kind of messed up like that. But coming down here, you just want to delete that and make sure that in the Z direction you change it to whatever you want. So you kind of have a bunch of blades individually. They are set to be their own object, like one object. So once you have them how you like it, you want to come up here and then apply both of those. And so we apply those, and you'll still notice that they're one object. And so to actually change that, we're going to come and select it in edit mode. And then we're going to, again, hit P, but instead of selection, we're going to do by loose parts. And that should separate them individually. And then you can also come back to edit mode, set the origin to the object itself, and then again, set it to the bottom of the grass blades like that. This is crucial for this next step. So the next step is to actually hit the F3 key and then type in random. as we can see here. We can see the random transform, and you kind of just want to mess around with the rotation and the scale. You don't really have to mess around with the location too much. You can also set a random seed at the top if you don't really like how it turned out, to just kind of give it a little bit more variation. You want to do this as many times as you want. I would recommend like 3 or 4 grass clumps with different seeds and stuff, just so you get more variation in the final scene. So once we have it how we like it, we're going to actually select all of these right here and hold Control and J to make it its one object. And so now if we move it around and everything, they will all move together. They're not individual grass things anymore. Now we're actually going to make a new collection, so this will be used for later. So you just want to select all of those, right click, and then hit New Scene Collection like that. And now we have a new grass collection. There's this flat little thing here, so I went ahead and deleted that. I didn't really need that for the scene. Next, we're actually going to set up the particle settings itself. So going into the particle properties, we're going to name it. We're going to set it to hair and advance. And then using our vertex group that we made before, we're going to go down to the vertex group settings, and in density, set that vertex group that we made before. That way, only the particles are showing up on screen. And in the render section, we're going to render as collection, and then select that grass collection we just made. Then I'm playing around with the scale and some of the scale randomness right here, just to add some variation to the scene, because no grass clump is ever the same. So we kind of want to add some variation like that. Coming down to this use count button, all this does is set how many of each object is on the scene. So I know I wanted the actual grass clump to be more in the scene compared to the dandelions and the tall grass and stuff. And so I just crank that number up while all the others stayed low. Basically just play around with that until you get something you like. In the rotation tab, we're just going to add some random rotation and phase and random phase. Basically just play around with this as well. We're trying to get as much randomness as possible, just so nothing looks like it's the same across the scene. Down here, we're adding some children. This is actually going to populate our scene with a bunch more grass and stuff, and make it look like it's more lived in. I'm also actually going to come up here and play around with the number a bit. This just adds, of course, more grass. You can add as much as you want, but it is going to be pretty taxing on your CPU and such. And so it was actually a little too harsh for mine, so I went ahead and changed the display amount to 1 and then kept the render amount at 10. This way in the actual viewport, it's smooth playback, and when we actually render, that's when most of the particles will be rendered. Coming over here, I'm just setting up a simple HDRI I downloaded from HDRI Haven. This way we can just get some lighting in the scene without having to do that much work. Just some quick lighting right there. This is the render result we got. Don't worry about the black stuff right now. We're kind of just focusing on the grass itself. We can fix that later. But the first thing I noticed is that the grass is not actually transparent, and in real life grass should be transparent. So I just came to the grass texture that the import images as planes add-on created, and just crank that transmission up a bit, just so the actual grass was see-through and some light was passing through it. Next, I wanted to create another clump of grass to be a little more discolored, and so I selected the blades that were a little more discolored, and then did the same method as I did before to create another clump of grass. Again, just making it its own object, and then setting that to be bunch 2. We can go into the count settings and actually make that increase that a bit, so we get more variation in the scene and a little bit more color. And so if we look at this image now, we'll notice that there's a little more color in the scene, but we'll notice that number 1, the ground is still white, so we got to play around with that. And number 2, there's a little too much grass. It looks kind of fake in my eyes. And so first, let's actually set up the ground texture. So I'm going to first UV unwrap this just by selecting everything in edit mode and then heading U. I did a simple cube projection just so we can get a fast UV unwrap. And then here I'm basically just combining 2 principled shaders into a mixed shader, and then the factor of that is being controlled by a noise texture, just so we get some variation in that. this noise texture I actually plugged into a color ramp node, so we can get more sharp edges between the grass and the rock. You can basically just play around without however you like. I think the end result looked pretty sick, and so we can also play around with the scale to show how much rock and grass are being shown together and how big that is. So I scaled that down a bit. Now I just quickly want to mention that I use the Node Wrangler add-on. So right here, I held Shift, Control, and T, and then I was able to select a lot of textures, and Blender automatically set up the node network itself. And so that's a quick, really simple tip like that. I also did that for the rock texture as well, just for the other principled BSDF. Now I'm actually adding in a value node, so we can control the scale of both the rock and the grass itself at the same time with the same node. And so I'm just plugging those into both of these scale like this, and with the value node I can actually tweak that and it will change the scale of the actual textures themselves. And so if I turn off the particle settings just so we can see that a little bit better, if I go ahead and play around with the value, we'll see that the rock and the grass actually become smaller. So this is the result we got from that. We will notice that there's still a little too much grass in here, and so a way to fix that and to actually make it look like it's actually growing out of the ground and stuff, we're gonna weight paint the actual plane, and that will let us decide where there's gonna be more grass and where there's gonna be less grass, and kind of make some random adjustments there. And so we can think about it as the same as vertex group, but we're actually painting on the weights on the actual plane. And so I'm just going to name mine grass shape like this. We just want to make another vertex group. But instead of hitting assign when you have it in edit mode, you just want to come up to weight paint right here. Again, make sure that shape, the grass shape, is selected. And then you can kind of just draw on here. Basically, red means the more concentrated areas and blue are less concentrated areas. And so we're basically just in the camera mode painting around, and this is the final result I did with my painting. And so now if we turn back on the particles, we'll notice that nothing has really changed, and that's because we need to come back down to the vertex group settings, and then instead of grass area, we want the actual grass shape. And we'll notice that it changes it around, and we can actually see some of the rock and stuff before down below the grass, and that kind of blends it in more. Now to change the black areas, we're actually going to come to the light path sections and increase both the transparency and transmission, and that removes the black areas like that. And then one final touch I'm going to add is just a little bit of defocus. And so to do that, we're just going to add in a simple empty plane axis arrow. Just going to put that in the middle of the scene here. And then if we come up to the actual camera and go into the camera properties, we can actually set that to defocus at that point. And so the depth of field, we can actually set the focus object to be our empty that we created. And now if we look at the actual scene, right around the arrows is clean, and then up above is actually more blurred. And then one last thing we're going to do is to actually add some denoising. So in our compositing tab, we're going to add a denoising node. And then in our view layer properties, we can actually check mark denoising data, and then plug in the noisy image, normal, and albedo, and then plug that final image into the composite socket. Okay guys, this is the final result that we got. Let me know how I did in the comment section below, or any suggestions you might have for other people wanting to make grass. I am going to do a more advanced tutorial where the grass is actually waving and stuff, so make sure you like and subscribe for that. I also want to mention that I have a Patreon and a Discord, so make sure to join both of those to support the channel. But anyway guys, thank you guys so much for watching, and I will see you guys later. Peace.